So Silverlight works with the tools that you have, and it also works with the tools that you know. It also is multi-platform, and it runs on the phone. It integrates with SharePoint. It integrates with Office. It even integrates with Eclipse. So what's next for Silverlight? As I mentioned, Silverlight 5, the beta was showed off at the keynote. There are a number of enhancements. I'm not going to go through and read the eye chart, but the big 4 categories are media, application development, out-of-browser improvements, and the tooling and performance. So these are my favorites that I cherry-picked from that previous list. XAML debugging. How many people here are Silverlight developers or WPF developers? Anyone? Okay, only one guy. All right, you're on my side. No, so if you've worked with the breakpoints and data binding, if something goes wrong, it's kind of a mysterious box. But now you can actually breakpoint in your XAML and see, as you code, what's failing. There's also implicit data templates. So since most people here are not Silverlight developers, data templates are ways that you have, if you have a list, you can structure the way that list looks like. Now, instead of every time you show a piece of data, you have to have a style associated with the control. Now you can say, I just want everything of this type to look this way, and it gets reused. Double-click support has now been added to Silverlight. There's also the interesting way that was done was such that you can actually track multiple clicks, so it's not just strictly 1 or 2 clicks. The usability, I think once you get beyond 3, really makes it difficult, but it's there if you need it. There's also XNA compatible 3D. So if you question.
Sorry, the XNA compatible 3D, is there now there's of course DirectX with compatible hardware? Is that a new hardware? I'm not familiar with the phrase XNA compatible 3D.
So I got to be careful how to move my head. So the question was, what does XNA compatible 3D mean? That means that it's a 3D engine that works very similar to the way it worked in XNA. So yes, that's all the GPU accelerated stuff that you would have direct.
Are most DirectX 10 or 11 things XNA compatible 3D or not?
Most.
Okay, I'll look them.
Most. There are very fine. I don't pretend to be an XNA expert. I never even played one on TV. That was a joke. I can tell my jokes are really going over. So there's a couple other things. If you're an XNA developer, and do we have any of those in the room? Any XNA developers? No. There's a lot of goodness in Silverlight here for you. Low latency sound effects, which if you ever try to time a sound effect in Silverlight to repeat, most business line of business applications don't have this problem. But if you are building a synthesizer or any kind of intense game or sound-heavy application, it does kind of come up where you have this quarter of a second or about 1/10 of a second delay between when you expect the sound to start and when it actually starts. That's actually been resolved now. The other thing is that you can actually open up different windows. And they're real windows, not like the child window object, which all exist inside the within the Silverlight control that you have. And there's a lot more performance improvements and fixes and a lot more. So 3D, here's a good example of a 3D application. It shows the medical record of Scott Guthrie, and apparently he works out a lot. So the nice thing is that I can drag this window if I have multiple monitors. Right now, Silverlight doesn't take advantage of that. If I launch a separate multiple window, I could drag that to any one of my extra monitors. You can also call platform invoke to call native code or connect to various devices. The last 2 features require elevated privileges and will only work out of browser. So in case you had any doubt about what the industry's acceptance is of Silverlight, it actually won InfoWorld's 2011 Rich Internet Application Development Platform of the Year. And so it really is, you know, obviously I'm biased for multiple reasons, but it really is the best of breed solution for rich internet applications. So let's do some Silverlight 5 demos. So any questions at this point?
Is there a shift between a Silverlight application platform, Silverlight target application types compared to like a year ago?
So the question was, is there a shift from target application types? Do you mean like what application types
is
that
it
Microsoft
like
says?
targeted more to phone now than it was, you know, to business applications?
I wouldn't say more. I mean, obviously more so than maybe like a year and a half ago because there was no phone. But so yeah, I mean, part of the confusion was the idea was that Flash is on 98, 99% of the computers that are connected to the internet. Silverlight is on about 60, 70%. Not bad for 4 years. But it's still not exactly ubiquitous. You can't throw up a site and just assume that everyone will have Silverlight already, in the same way that people have Flash already. So you really have to have a big need. I'm talking public internet. So you really have to have a good need for the Silverlight. You just can't have that silly bouncing or logo on fire thing. Right? You have to have a draw to install it. And in those scenarios, we've seen a lot of success in regards to the Olympics, Monday Night Football. People, to get that extra experience, people don't mind installing a plugin. But if you're trying to sell something, and there was a famous .com that blew up in the early 2000s, boo.com, and it basically was entirely Flash-based, and it crashed all the time. So if you crash, you're not going to sell. You're going to sell a lot less. So for the public internet, where it really excels is DRM scenarios, Netflix. You're not going to encourage a lot of studios to have their movies streamable if it can easily be hijacked. That stream can be hijacked. Silverlight has a lot of DRM protections that makes various copyright owners happy. Silverlight also can provide better media experiences, as we saw with the Summer and Winter Olympics. But if I had my site navigation, all right, my site's a bad example, Frank's World, because I do have a Silverlight navigation. But if somebody comes to my site and they don't have Silverlight installed, they get that little Silverlight's not installed. So I guess you could say I drank the Kool-Aid. But if I had a customer or a client, I would be, for something as critical as navigation, there really ought to be a fallback to just plain HTML. So you had a question.
Kind of following up on that,
Yeah.
there's, not to beat the grill in the room thing, but the main draws that I take away of going to Silverlight, you mentioned the DRM, better media. What would be your second, third, and fourth reasons of compelling reasons to use Silverlight compared to HTML5?
So the question, just so this is recorded for prosperity, not because I like repeating what you said, although I'm sure I would. So the question was, what would be, since we mentioned the top two, which would be DRM and enhanced media, what would be the other reasons to use Silverlight over HTML5? And the answer to that shows that I used to be a consultant, and the answer is it depends. If we're talking public-facing websites, certainly if you're building an application that has a lot of rich, the downside of HTML5 is it's still HTML, and it relies on what language? Its scripting language is JavaScript. Not a lot of people really thoroughly enjoy developing in JavaScript, right? I mean, see, there was laughter. That's good. And then you also get this whole thing of how much JavaScript you really want. I'll show you some really cool HTML5 demos, but if you look behind the scenes, There's a lot of JavaScript in there. Each jQuery, frameworks like that, like Modernizer, they take away a lot of the pain, but there's still pain involved. And so you can do something, well, I'll throw out some arbitrary numbers. It might take 10 times the amount of lines of code to do something, or 100, in HTML5 and JavaScript that you can do in one line in Silverlight. So certainly, environments where you can control what's installed on a desktop, intranets, behind the firewall, line of business applications. You can unit test Silverlight apps. You can unit test, because it's C#. A lot of organizations are not going to be enthralled with the notion of taking on the ownership of tens of thousands of lines of JavaScript. But if it's C# code, it's managed code, that's something that they're a lot more going to be happier taking on. So the question was, do I find that the single execution context is a big selling point? What do you mean by single execution?
That you don't especially have to say, I'm going to test my JavaScript and HTML against a host of different parameters.
Oh, that is actually an excellent point. So the promise of the web was always write once, run anywhere. We saw that. We've been promised that multiple times. Did that actually happen in Web 1.0? Not really. You write once and you test in every conceivable possible combination. Operating system, browser version. So you have this, instead of this write once, run anywhere, you have this matrix of, well, you write it once and it mostly runs everywhere, kind of, sort of the same way. If you're doing something simple, it's not a big deal. But as sites get more complex, as users' expectations of what their experience should be when they visit your site get more complicated, that becomes a much bigger deal. The real advantage of Silverlight is that if I write a Silverlight app, it's going to run the same on Windows as it does on the Mac, as it does on Unix, and it's going to run the same in Opera, Safari, Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer. It's going to run the same. And that is a big win. And particularly for intranet applications, that's a big deal. Because, I'm trying to think of a site. So if CNN has a banner ad rotating that bounces or something like that, yeah, that's a big deal. But if the CEO of your company or the CIO tries to book a flight using your internal travel application and he likes Chrome and you didn't code for Chrome, you're going to have some splaining to do, is ultimately what it comes down to. So, I mean, the cost of ownership for organizations, the cost of owning Silverlight code is going to be a lot less because you have that one single point of execution. I like that phrase. I'm going to use that for now. Question?
How close are Silverlight and WPF at this point?
Silverlight, the question was, how close are Silverlight and WPF? It's so close that it's confusing. So the nice thing is that your skill set going from one to the other is largely the same. But there's going to be certain things, particularly going from WPF to Silverlight, certain things that you like, little niceties that aren't necessarily in Silverlight or aren't implemented by default. So do you do WPF development?
Yes.
All right. So what I'll say next will probably make more sense to him than everybody else. So I'm talking directly at you. For instance, two-way binding. I'll explain that in a second. Is on by default in WPF, off by default in Silverlight. I'm not going to judge the decision, but there's a lot of little weird gotchas that will surprise you. But you're already familiar with dependency properties. You're already familiar with data binding. You're already familiar with a lot of the core concepts. XAML, obviously. So the things that'll bug you will be minor gotchas.